Welcome to St. Louis and Me. I'm Michelle Anselmo. Today, Marion McCord from Chad's Coalition joins us. She's the co-founder and executive director. Marion, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the invitation.
Let's start with Chad's Coalition and tell us about this organization.
Okay. Chad's Coalition is an organization that was founded in memory of my son, Chad. Chad was one, I have 3 children, and he was my middle child that was the poster child of success on the outside. And, but he had many gifts, but he also had something that I didn't know, and that was depression. And it was in his fall of his senior year that after a long phone conversation with his girlfriend, he told her on the phone that he wanted to take his life. She did what she was supposed to do, and she called us, and we did what we were supposed to do, and we called the doctors. But unfortunately for Chad, it was too little, too late. That was in October, and then 6 months later, I lost my son to suicide. And that was 15 years ago. And it was, I'll never forget, it was one of Chad's dreams as he was sitting cross-legged on his hospital bed after a suicide attempt. He said, "Mom, when I get better," and he goes, "I know I'm not there yet, but when I get better, I want to go back to my school and say, my name is Chad, and I have depression," to teach other kids not to do what he did, and that was to hide his illness in shame and silence. And unfortunately, Chad will never be able to fulfill that dream. But as his parents, we vowed to be his voice, to raise awareness and to educate about mental illness and the importance of good mental health. So from his death, we gave birth to Chad's Coalition, and CHADS is an acronym for Communities Healing Adolescent Depression and Suicide. And I'm just so proud to say that we went from that idea of trying to honor that memory and to make a difference to we are one of the leaders in suicide prevention, not just in this community, but in the St. Louis area, regional, and I'm a recipient of a national award. And we have 40 employees. And so we know without a doubt that we have saved many lives. And our 3 main programs are the Signs of Suicide program, where we go into primarily middle schools and high schools and talk to kids about what does depression look like, or what does it look like if someone is suicidal, and most importantly, how can you help yourself or your friend when you recognize those warning signs. And it's pretty consistent no matter where we are. It's usually around 15% of the kids will self-identify after that presentation that they need to talk to their school counselor. And so for those kids, it's important that they have resources, and sometimes those resources might be in place, but certainly we offer to that school and to that family that if that person needs help, that CHADS is another resource for them. We have clinicians that are trained in how to work with kids that are suicidal or struggling with some pretty intense anxiety or depression, that we can help them. So that's the second program. The final program, social emotional well-being. We are trying to get to these kids as soon as possible. My son had disclosed to that psychiatrist on his first visit that he had been thinking about taking his life since he was in 3rd grade. We don't do suicide prevention to a student or to a child that young, so we're looking for opportunities to get in front of that child sooner. And the Missouri Department of Mental Health asked us to champion bullying prevention. And no matter what school you're in, there is bullying, and that we know now, based on research, that that bullying, if it's significant enough, can have just as much of a deficit or impact, negative impact on that child as physical or sexual abuse. So again, it's important to talk about it, and so that's what we do.
And you have been talking about it for 15 years.
Right.
What is changing and where is the positive?
Adults are starting to talk about it more, and it's on everyone's radar. More, not enough, but more. So we feel confident that the kids are talking more about it because we know how many kids that we're talking to every year. Just this past year, just here in the St. Louis area, we talked to almost 60,000 kids, 25 at a time. So, and that's really so important because when we go in and talk to that classroom, not only are we looking for the child that's struggling, we're looking to educate all their support systems. So that's changed in that it's easier to get into schools now. When there is a suicide, that tends to open the doors for us that, yeah, I wish we had been talking about this more. We need to talk about that. So that's a great change in terms of just the growth of all of our programs. and having support and resources in place for those kids once they're able to find the courage to say, I need help. So we're just super excited about the additional resources that are there, and also reaching out to kids who are struggling with gender identity, trying to have support systems in place for them. More and more kids are coming out and identifying with a different gender. Also trying to do a better job in terms of supporting their supports, such as their parents and the teachers.
And you mentioned, so much of this happening in schools. Let's take a closer look at the impact it is having around the St. Louis region.
CHADS is addressing some issues in the community that really needs to be addressed.
We as an agency really care a lot about kids that struggle.
Bottom line is that it helps the children, and it's helping real children every single day.
CHADS Coalition was founded by my husband and I in memory, in honor of our son Chad, who lost his battle to depression in 2004. He died by suicide. I wanted to try to find all those kids like Chad that were sitting in those desks, that were struggling silently and not having the courage to reach out for help. Our first program was family support, where we wanted to connect families to services that were available to them. Because when Chad got sick for us, we jumped in the skillet, turned on high. We didn't know what to do, where to turn. And then we also started the SOS Signs of Suicide program, which is an evidence-based program talking to kids about depression and suicide and what it looks like.
Since 2011, we've had CHADS come in when I was at the junior high for those 2 years, and then we've had CHADS in the high school every year that I've been here.
Every one of those programs have morphed into something even a little bit different. The social and emotional well-being program, we go in, we try to change the culture of that school in terms of working with kids one-on-one. Family support has transitioned from providing connections to providing one-on-one clinical support for kids who struggle with anxiety or depression or actively having thoughts of suicide. And currently, I think about 45% of the kids that we see in our family support program are struggling with suicidal thoughts.
It's really important now more than ever because 2 years ago we did have the 3 suicides in the spring. It is becoming more talked about, and I think it's great for CHADS to come in and recognize what the students' concerns are, also our staff's concerns.
I go into the classrooms and being able to speak with them and really asking them, when you think about a person being depressed, what does that look like? Think about a person that might have thoughts about harming themselves. What are those signs? And then asking them, what would you do?
We know when we go into a classroom, when we start talking about suicide, and there's 25 students, we know that there will probably be, based on statistics, that there will be between 1 to 2 of those kids are going to try to kill themselves that year. But we're talking to that whole classroom, empowering every one of those students in that classroom that they can make a difference.
At the end of our presentation, we basically do a screening that sees if a student or anybody else is having basically an elevated risk, potentially doing harm to themselves. There's been several times that I've been in a classroom that 4 or 5 people will write a self-ID for one particular person and their grade and their classroom. But that presentation really spoke to them saying, okay, this person really, immediately needs help.
We had one specific one that he was really down when he was on the bus ride home. He disclosed to 2 friends. He reached out to 2 kids that were sophomores that had had the signs of suicide presentation, and they immediately went and sought out the coach and told him right away. It was a good call.
There's always barriers to access care. And we do a lot of work in the underserved community.
Primarily with people of color, a lot of the times having the discussion about depression and suicide is taboo.
You can see actually changes, and you can measure changes.
The CHADS mentor was the first thing that we put in place once a kid got on our radar. The CHADS mentoring relationship provided an outlet for those children that really needed to talk about what was going on.
Just to have somebody consistently come and just listen to me. You know, very rarely, you know, even as adults, do you have somebody that'll just listen.
We crunched the numbers, and children who were placed with a mentor, they saw a 43% reduction in conversations with the dean of students that might be related to behavior or disruption or something that was preventing them from learning in the classroom. And that's a pretty giant decrease.
Anybody can look like Chad. My message is that nobody needs to go through this alone. It's not something that anybody can prevent.
The mentor helps them get to a place where they can be the most successful in their classroom.
So we try to meet kids where they are, and that's in the school. And so now a lot of our family support is provided through different schools. We also have individual counseling that we do in an off-site location. And so all of our programs are very interconnected.
Chad's is a gold mine in the community.
As a mom who's lost a child, anything I can do so that my story is not your story.
To take that challenge that she faced in life and to turn that around, you know, to help other people, grow it to help other people, I think that's so fantastic.
How we're just so spread thin, but for somebody like our clinician to come in here and be able to, again, donate that time, that one-on-one time, or even when she's done our group work, have that time with them is just amazing, and our students are responding so well, and we've seen growth from that, and I think, to me, that's worth every penny.
Well, Marion, we've seen firsthand all the amazing resources that you're providing these families. Let's talk about some of the warning signs as parents.
Thank you for asking that question, because I think it's something we all can do a better job knowing. I want people to know how common this is in our children. And we research on surveys from the kids that 1 out of 8 kids has depression. So this is something I want every parent to know, just as you know the warning signs of meningitis or what to do if my child has a fever. For younger children, and I'm talking teens and especially the teenagers, the first thing on the warning list is anger, irritability, and rage. And that's not for many of us, that we don't think of that as a warning sign of depression, but that's usually how it often presents with our adolescents. Think in terms of, have you noticed these changes? Look for maybe 4 or 5 of them. And if you do say, yeah, I have noticed that, it doesn't mean that it's an automatic diagnosis of depression, but what it does mean is, that's concerning, and I need to have someone else, a professional, dig a little bit deeper into this. So the warning signs, anger, irritability, and rage. Look for sometimes kids lose interest in things that they used to love to do. Chad was a soccer player, but toward the end, he just had no desire to play soccer anymore. Often they begin to isolate. And again, as a teenager, it's a normal behavior for them to pull off or to isolate themselves from their parents or some of their siblings, but it's not normal for them to begin to isolate themselves from their friends. So look for that. Is there a change in eating habits? Sometimes we'll lose the desire to eat, or maybe we might have the other extreme where we're overeating. We're looking for the answer in the bowl of ice cream or comfort. It's a disorder of the brain. So is there a change in their grades or their ability to stay on task? Often the grades will begin to slip. Are there changes in behavior in terms of risky behaviors? Are they starting to maybe drink a little bit more, or smoke marijuana, or doing some other high risky behaviors?
So then the next step, so say you've identified, do you suggest maybe asking your child? And then what if the answer is something you're not prepared to deal with?
Perfect question. Should I ask my child if I have a concern? Yes, because so many parents are afraid to ask that question because for multiple reasons. They're afraid they might give them an idea, and that is not true. Trust me. If they're thinking about it, they've been thinking about it for a while, and they would love an invitation that maybe perhaps you can help me with those thoughts. Or if they say, yes, oh my God, what do I do now? It's a hard question to ask, because often we're sometimes afraid of how they might answer it. But it's so important that you ask that question. And if they do say yes, don't feel that as their mom or dad that you have to fix it, but you know they need professional help. And to call your pediatrician, or call the school counselor, call someone who you know that has knowledge about this field. What can I do to help them? If they answer yes, they are at a risk for a possible suicide attempt. I'm not saying for sure, but it's a possibility. The child needs help if they said yes.
And how are a lot of parents finding you, kind of hearing through the school? Talk a little bit about if somebody calls, they see this, and they're reaching out for that next step. What does that process look like?
Kids come to us from multiple possibilities. Sometimes the school counselor refers them to us. Sometimes BHR, which is Youth Connection Hotline, we are on their list of resources, and that hotline number is something you should all have on your refrigerator, so it's there when you need it. They will refer kids to us. Pediatricians will refer kids to us. And often kids and families who have gone through CHADS will refer a family or a friend and recommend us as a good resource to them. And again, I know it's hard. It's not the dream that we had for our children if they disclose that they're struggling, but I really, really encourage you to listen to your child and don't judge them or think less of them. It's something they've probably been hiding a long time. It takes a lot of courage to disclose that I'm struggling with depression or that I'm struggling with thoughts of suicide. And it's hard for a child to disclose that for many reasons. Sometimes because of the stigma that our society still places, or that how we look at people with depression. Sometimes kids they don't want to disappoint their parents. So create a safe place. Don't judge me. And please, as mom or dad, will you listen to me?
And that sounds like what you're doing as an organization too when you're in these schools. So tell us, you had mentioned some stats earlier, just about what we are finding. And now, 15 years in, you're able to kind of compile data and trends and really see a good picture of what's happening with our teen population and young kids, right?
Suicide is a problem that it's not new in the last decade. It's been happening for centuries. It's been happening all over the world. It's a public health crisis. What I want parents to know, again, how common it is, and that there's hope out there, and that there's people and there's resources out there. 1 out of 8 kids struggle with depression. Many of our children, before the depression breaks loose, they present with anxiety. This is something that is another warning sign of depression, and anxiety tends to hit even the younger child. Depression tends to break loose maybe in high school or right after high school, but it can break loose in elementary school. But anxiety is something that we see earlier concern, so we want parents to address that as well. And as that child grows into high school or they go into college, there's different mental health manifestations that can present themselves. So just always being aware of any concerns that your child might be having.
Well, let's take a closer look at the Signs of Suicide program that's in nearly 200 schools across the area.
My name is Colleen Pace. I am the Suicide Prevention Program Manager with CHADS Coalition for Mental Health. CHADS is a nonprofit agency that focuses on suicide prevention. Our mission is to save young lives through the advancement and awareness of depression and suicide.
I first learned about CHADS when I was a mentor teacher, and a student had come to me looking for a way to help people with mental health.
Many of our students come from trauma. We have students who are at higher risk for suicide just because of the environment that they come from. CHADS is a wealth of information. There are options for educational activities for students as well as for parents, information that is current and appropriate and necessary.
A lot of times you might have somebody sitting there who has been suffering from depression and they don't even know that that's what they have. The CHADS Coalition presenter will come in and they will give the Signs of Suicide presentation. So they'll learn a little bit about CHADS Coalition, they'll learn a little bit about CHAD and why this even started, and then the signs and symptoms of someone who might be suffering from depression or anxiety, and then what they might see in their friend.
It taught me that when I was in high school that you have to watch out for these things because you don't even know how prominent it is until like you get the training and then you go back to school and you realize that it's been going on all along, but you just weren't aware of it.
When CHADS came last year, they had the students fill out forms at the end of their presentation. And on the forms, the students had to check, I don't need to talk to a counselor at this point, or I need to speak with a counselor sometime relatively soon, or I'm feeling suicidal, I need to speak with someone immediately. Out of all of our students, we had a fairly significant number who self-referred from those forms. These are students that we might not have picked up on had it not been for the presentation by CHADS.
We spoke to 29,528 students in the 2017-2018 school year. Of the students that we spoke to, 13.2% of them asked to speak to a counselor for themselves or a friend. That's 3,928 students that were connected to a counselor because of the SOS program.
I know that suicide is the second leading cause of death among adolescents. I think often parents have no idea how prevalent this is and how seriously it needs to be taken. I think sometimes they think, oh, they're teenagers, they're just being dramatic, I can blow this off. Or if they recognize that it's really serious, they don't really know where to turn or who to talk to, who to reach out to with these concerns.
CHADS Coalition has actually helped actually in my family because my son went to the same school where I teach. And he was going through some hard times and he was struggling. So I actually sent him to a counselor at CHADS Coalition, and he got through his own personal hard time and dealing with his own symptoms. And I can't, as a parent, I don't know where a lot of kids would be without CHADS Coalition.
As school employees and as parents, the more support we can get, the better. The more outside organizations that we can tap into for information and help and direction, the better off we are and the better off our students are ultimately.
I believe that everybody has big plans for their life. I just don't want people's minds to get in the way of their goals. The people that work from this program are awesome, and the goal that they have for this community is just remarkable. I think it needs to be shared everywhere. All the information needs to be shared everywhere, and that people really need to know what to do to confront a person with suicide or depression.
Without the education, they don't even know that they have a problem. Getting that communication from student to student is really a huge part, and I think a very integral part of getting them help.
It's not easy to talk about suicide all day long, but when you hear one story about a student that's getting the help that they need, it's invigorating and it makes you want to keep doing it more and more. We thank everybody for all of the support that they have given CHADS in the past and ask that they continue to do so. The more support that we get, the more kids we are able to help. We hope to continue to do that and save those lives.
Well, Marion, this is an evidence-based program that's having real impact and results. Talk about the other programs and how they are all interconnected for the services and support you're offering.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the Signs of Suicide program, and that's really our main program getting into the schools for 5th grade on up, talking about what depression looks like, and really, again, getting that conversation started among the students, getting those kids that confidence and the courage to say, I need help. When a student says, I do need help, we want to make sure that there are resources there to support that child. The last thing we want them to do is have the courage to say, I need help, and fall through a gaping hole in our mental health system. The other program that allows us to get to that child before they're in 5th grade, because we know that some children struggle, we also know that there's bullying in the school. So the social and emotional well-being, looking for kids who are maybe struggling with fitting in, or maybe they've been bullied, or they're bullying other children, And it's so important that we address these concerns as soon as possible to hopefully try to change the trajectory of that child's life. So CHADS has programs, bullying prevention programs that we offer in the schools. We also offer to schools to work with kids who are struggling, work with them one-on-one. They're not a clinician, but is someone who is trained in social and emotional wellness, to sit down and work with that child one-on-one. We know the power of one trusting, helpful adult in a child's life. And as wonderful as our teachers are, and they are wonderful, it's hard to make that extra special connection when you have 25 kids in your classroom at any given time. So that mentoring program is huge to really work with that child one-on-one. So it's what we call kind of our safety net that we provide for children in schools.
What's the easiest way to get in touch, and what do you need? Donations, volunteers, what kind of supports?
How to get in touch with CHADS Coalition, you can go through our website, chadscoalition.org. Talk to your pediatrician. Our phone number, 314-952-2046. Pick up the phone and call. If you want a clinician, 314-952-8274. How can you get involved? First of all, I want you listening to your children. Be non-judgmental to them. We have needs for volunteers from coming into our office, which is in South County, to help us score surveys. We are at a lot of resource fairs. We need help to support those. We also need people to come into the office to be a receptionist. We are also currently always looking for people who really care about children's social and emotional well-being or their mental health in terms of clinical. Right now, we're really needing additional clinicians, whether you're a LPC or a social worker that can help us help kids.
And you always have wonderful events too?
We do. Thank you. We need volunteers to help at our events. We have a trivia night coming up in May, which is going to be a blast. And then in September, we have our gala. That's all on our website. And it's really not working. It's a lot of fun. And you are helping us help kids.
Well, Marian, thank you so much for helping us help the community.
My pleasure. Thank you, Michelle.
So inspiring to talk to you today.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for us on this edition of St. Louis and Me. Until next time.